Because it's Science Week, we are going to do a presentation about Tourette syndrome, which is a genetic disease that's passed down generations.
So, what is Tourette syndrome? It is a neurodevelopmental disorder that is characterized by motor and vocal tics that present during childhood. Tics are sudden switches, movements, or sounds that people do repeatedly. People who have tics cannot stop their body from doing these things. Tourette syndrome is included in the DSM-5 as the most complex of tic disorders and is legally recognized in the United States as a disability. The prevalence of Tourette syndrome is estimated around 0.5 to 1% of the global population. Tourette syndrome is a autosomal dominant genetic disorder, which means that both girls and boys, men and women are affected, and only one copy of gene is necessary for the development of this syndrome. Tourette syndrome is 3 to 4 times prevalent in boys than girls, however. Since Tourette syndrome is a neurodevelopmental disorder, only the brain is affected. Different parts of the brain, including an area called the basal ganglia, which helps control body movements, are affected. Differences there may affect nerve cells and the chemicals that carry messages between them. Researchers think the trouble in this brain network may play a major role in Tourette's. Some of the biological pathways of Tourette syndrome are genetics, neurotransmitters, brain structure and function, environmental factors, and immune system dysfunction. There's a significant genetic component associated with Tourette's. Studies have shown that individuals with a family history of tic disorders are more likely to develop TS-specific genes. Dysregulation of neurotransmitters, particularly dopamine, structural and functional abnormalities in certain brain regions are also associated with TS. Factors such as prenatal and perinatal complications, maternal smoking during pregnancy, and exposure to certain toxins have been investigated as potential environmental triggers for TS. Last but not least, autoimmune responses or inflammatory processes may contribute to the neurodevelopmental abnormalities seen in Tourette syndrome.
So, what is a tic? Tics are involuntary sounds or movements that are caused by certain disorders. In the context of the Tourette syndrome, there are simple and complex tics. Simple tics involve just a few parts of the body, whereas complex tics involve several different parts of the body and can usually have a pattern. Some examples of simple tics are eye blinking, head jerking, shoulder shrugging, etc. And complex tics usually occur in forms of touching or smelling objects, repeating observed movements, and stepping in certain patterns.
And the other behaviors, the first one is the disinhibition. So the children, they can stop themselves consistently from expressing behaviors, thoughts, or displaying actions that someone else might be able to control. Obsessive compulsive behaviors are characterized by like recurrent unwanted thoughts and images or repetitive behaviors, which the person hopes to will prevent the obsessive thoughts or make them stop. And the obsessive compulsive behaviors come from the strong comorbidity between Tourette syndrome and the OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And the rage, small percentage of children with Tourette syndrome have outbursts of uncontrollable anger, often referred to in the Tourette syndrome community as rage, as a symptom of Tourette syndrome. Generally, but not always, is displayed in the home setting or more frequently than at school. Usually, the child or adult might yelling through things and perhaps calling other names. And the fourth, the coprolalia. This is a symptom of Tourette syndrome characterized by unwelcome, unwanted, and uncontrollable of words or phrases that are not appropriate.
So, what are some effects on daily life from these symptoms? People with Tourette syndrome might be more likely to have learning differences, a learning disability, or a developmental delay that affects their ability to study. Many people with Tourette syndrome have problems with writing, organization, and paying attention. They might also have problems processing what they hear or see. Because of this, they may require more time to answer a question or to respond to a directive. Some people with Tourette syndrome have learned to fill in the awkward silence by saying something. And these things can usually be negative or offensive, such as "this is dumb" or "I don't care about your stupid question." Here's a video with first-hand accounts of children with Tourette syndrome.
I'm in control of everything else. Why aren't I in control of that? Why can't I stop myself from doing that?
Like I have to go like that every single second.
I just feel like kind of funny inside. I say like, why can't I stop doing this? Why can't I stop doing this?
I had a tick, like a really loud screeching noise. All the kids would like tell me to stop and just keep staring at me.
Things trigger ticks, and like let's say reading letters, I guess. Like every time you come to the letter P, you'd have to jump like on one foot, like that.
You feel like a marked man.
Tourette's isn't like a whole another person. Like me. I'm a regular kid.
These are the voices of Tourette's.
It's there. Why do you have to make...
Now, while Tourette syndrome does not need a cure, there are ways to help alleviate symptoms and other behaviors that occur because of Tourette's. Medications can be used to help Tourette's. That would include medications that block or lessen dopamine, ADHD medications, antidepressants, and anti-seizure medications. The following medications are used mostly because of the strong comorbidity between Tourette syndrome and disorders like ADHD, OCD, and anxiety disorders. Some medications that interact with dopamine have over 70% to 90% tic reduction rate. Other medications show high percentages in the reduction of other behavioral symptoms, some of which arise from the comorbidity. There are also therapy options for people with Tourette's. Someone with Tourette's can use talk therapy, which would help them handle the social, emotional, and mental impacts of living with the disorder and other symptoms. There's also the less commonly known behavior therapy. Psychologists can use a technique called habit reversal training to help someone manage their ticcing behaviors. Other options include Botox injections and deep brain stimulation. Botox injections decrease muscle activity to help reduce tics, while DBS decreases neural activity in certain brain areas with an implanted electrode to reduce tics. Both of these techniques are invasive, which sounds negative, but it just means that the technique involves entering the body. Botox is usually used to treat specific motor or vocal tics. Most studies show effectiveness, with one study that used Botox in the vocal cords finding that 94% of the patients experienced improvement, while 41% seemed to not have the tic entirely anymore. Studies with DBS have shown various tic improvement rates, with the highest being 90% and the lowest being 21% for vocal tics. The reduction rate changes depending on what part of the brain receives treatment. The mean of most results sits around 60 to 70% reduction. There's also another option that's much newer and still being researched. This is RTMS, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. It affects brain activity of certain areas non-invasively with an electromagnetic coil on the scalp. This is a relatively newer treatment, so more research So what are some ways that we can make life easier for people with Tourette's? We might not always know how to talk about disability or to someone with disability. That's okay. The important thing is that you stay open-minded and willing to learn. We should also make sure to keep an eye on our language, because while we might mean no harm, we often don't realize the impacts of it. We should try to use person-first language instead of identity-first language, which means that we place the person before their diagnosis and say, a person with autism, not an autistic person.
And here's a poster that's telling about the Tourette syndrome children, and we should do like to stop coding at them and ignore their tics and look deep into their self and explain to them what is wrong with them and teaching them relaxation techniques.
That is the end of our presentation. Thank you.